We have been systematically conditioned to believe that the sandwich is the last honest fast food. When you look at a burger, you see industrial processing, frozen patties, yellow cheese food products, and grease traps. But a sandwich? A sandwich feels like a kitchen. You watch them slice the turkey, you see the green lettuce, you smell the bread baking in real time. It is the ultimate multi-billion-dollar health-conscious illusion, but behind that green and yellow branding, and beneath the warm scent of proofing dough, lies a landscape of systemic exploitation, predatory finance, and jaw-dropping sanitation failures. At this very moment, the quick-service sandwich industry is a legal and operational battleground. We are talking about a world where corporate parent companies systematically squeeze their own franchisees to the point of bankruptcy, where health departments are forced to shutter locations for running with zero hot water, and where federal investigators are catching 14-year-old children operating commercial deep fryers to save a franchise owner a few dollars an hour on labor. Consider the paradox of the industry's former giant. In 2006, one toasted sandwich empire was an absolute juggernaut. It had nearly 4,700 locations, pulled in $2 billion a year, and was actively threatening to dethrone Subway. Today, more than 95% of those stores are gone. They didn't close because people suddenly lost their appetite for toasted bread. They vanished because of a highly calculated financial maneuver that loaded the brand with hundreds of millions of dollars in debt, turning a thriving food business into a hollowed-out debt-servicing vehicle. The owners who poured their life savings into those franchises were left holding the bag, watching their equipment get auctioned off, online for pennies on the dollar. And then there is the giant itself. The single largest sandwich chain on Earth is currently fighting a war on almost every legal front imaginable. They are being sued by customers who claim their advertised steak subs contain 200% less meat than promised. They have faced multi-year legal battles questioning if their tuna is actually tuna. And their bread contains so much sugar that a European Supreme Court ruled it couldn't legally be defined as bread at all. While corporate offices design shiny ad campaigns, the reality on the ground is deteriorating. Go to the municipal health department databases of almost any major American city, and the reports read like a horror script. Black, slimy pork cultivating inside the very ice machines that fill your cup. Meat slicers and prep tables wiped down with lukewarm, bacteria-ridden water because the hot water heater has been broken for days. Wage theft lawsuits alleging tens of thousands of dollars in unpaid overtime taken directly from the pockets of low-wage workers. This isn't just a story of a few bad managers or isolated incidents of poor training. This is a story about a fundamental structural shift in the American food landscape. It is a story of what happens when the private equity spreadsheet completely replaces the chef, when independent operators are treated as cash cows to be milked by corporate distributors, and when food quality becomes an afterthought to debt leverage. By the time this investigation is over, you will understand the exact mechanics of this decline. You will see how a beloved brand can be bought, gutted, and left to survive solely as a ghost kitchen, wedged behind a gas station coffee machine. You will learn the terrifying reality of what is quietly breeding in the ice machines of chains that trade on warm nostalgia. But more importantly, you will discover that a few chains actually took a different path, rejecting the private equity playbook to preserve real ingredients, hand-cut prep work, and ethical sourcing at a scale that shouldn't be possible. To understand how we reach this point of crisis, we have to look at the structural trap that was laid decades ago. We have to look at how a simple sandwich shop became the perfect target for Wall Street's most predatory financial instruments. To trace the collapse of the modern sandwich shop, you have to look at two distinct structural innovations that turned a stable business model into a high-pressure meat grinder: the predatory franchise agreement and the leveraged buyout. Let's start with the geography of encroachment. In the traditional fast food model, like McDonald's, the corporate office acts as a real estate developer. They purchase the land, lease it back to the franchisee, and carefully protect geographic territories to ensure stores do not cannibalize each other's sales. Subway did the exact opposite. Founded by Fred DeLuca and Peter Buck in 1965, Subway's expansion strategy was built on an incredibly low barrier to entry. In the early 2000s, a franchise fee for a Subway was just $15,000, compared to upwards of $45,000 for a McDonald's. This low cost allowed everyday middle-class families and immigrants to buy into the business, believing they were securing their financial future. But the model contained a built-in geographic trap. Subway's corporate office did not make its money on the profitability of individual stores. It made its money on a massive 8% royalty taken directly from weekly gross sales. Whether a store was turning a profit or bleeding cash, corporate got paid first. Because of this, Subway allowed franchises to open literally across the street from one another. In urban centers, you could stand at the door of one Subway and see two others. To corporate, 3 stores generating $10,000 a week each was far better than one store generating $20,000, even if all 3 operators were quietly drowning in overhead. This geographic oversaturation turned franchisees into direct competitors with their own brand, capping their revenue while corporate's royalty stream broke records. While Subway was cannibalizing its footprint, its main competitor, Quiznos, was busy demonstrating an even more aggressive corporate squeeze play. In 2006, CCMP Capital Advisors acquired a majority stake in Quiznos through a leveraged buyout. For the uninitiated, a leveraged buyout is a financial maneuver where an investment firm buys a company using a small amount of its own cash and a massive amount of borrowed money. The kicker? The debt used to buy company is then placed onto the balance sheet of the acquired company itself. Suddenly, Quiznos owed hundreds of millions of dollars to Wall Street lenders. To service this debt, corporate could no longer rely on standard franchise fees and royalties. They needed to extract more cash immediately. Their solution was American Food Distributors, a corporate-controlled supply company. Quiznos corporate legally mandated that every single franchisee purchase their bread, meat, paper cups, and even cleaning supplies exclusively through this distributor. Because it was a closed, captive market, Quiznos marked up the prices of these essential goods far above market rate. Store owners reported paying $60 for a case of paper cups that cost $20 on the open market. A box of turkey breast that should have cost $30 was invoiced at $50. This pricing structure meant that, even if a Quiznos was packed with customers, the owner was barely breaking even. Corporate was making its profit on the wholesale markup before the food even reached the toaster. The store owners were essentially unpaid managers operating high-end distribution hubs for corporate supply chain. The human toll of this system became agonizingly public in 2006. Pupinder Baba, a franchisee who operated a Quiznos in Long Beach, California, took his own life inside his store. In his suicide note, he explicitly named Quiznos corporate and their predatory supply chain practices as the direct cause of his ruin, stating that the company's legal department had systematically destroyed him. This tragedy sparked a massive class action lawsuit from over 8,000 franchisees, which Quiznos eventually settled in 2009 for $95 million. But the settlement money was a drop in the bucket compared to the billions lost by individual families. The breaking point for the entire industry arrived in 2008 with the onset of the Great Recession. To combat falling foot traffic, Subway launched its legendary $5 footlong campaign. It was a massive marketing success that drove millions of cash-strapped consumers through Subway's doors. But for the franchisees, it was a catastrophe. The $5 price point was mandated nationwide, but the actual cost to produce the sandwich, the bread, meat, cheese, labor, and utilities, often exceeded $4 in high-cost cities. Once Sub's 8% royalty and 4.5% advertising fee were deducted, franchisees were losing money on every single transaction. For Quiznos, the $5 footlong was the death knell. Because Quiznos franchisees were already paying inflated food costs through their corporate distributor, they could not lower their prices to compete with Subway without going bankrupt overnight. If they kept their prices high, customers walked. If they lowered them, their profit margin went negative. The fallout was swift and devastating. In 2009 alone, 700 Quiznos locations collapsed. The following year, another 800 shuttered. Franchises who had leveraged their homes to buy into the system were left ruined. Equipment from closed stores flooded online auction sites, with commercial ovens and prep tables selling for pennies on the dollar. By 2014, Quiznos itself was forced to file for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. carrying over $875 million in debt. The brand was sold, restructured, and sold again, passing through 5 different ownership groups in 5 years. Each transition stripped more assets from the brand, culminating in its acquisition by High Bluff Capital Partners in 2018. What was once a multi-billion-dollar brand with thousands of vibrant storefronts was systematically reduced to a legacy nameplate. Today, the few remaining Quiznos operate largely as low-overhead kiosks inside gas stations and highway rest stops. The physical real estate of the standalone sandwich shop, the brick-and-mortar locations that once defined American suburbs, had become too expensive to maintain under the weight of institutional debt. This is the geographic and economic trap of the modern sandwich industry. It is a system designed to extract maximum value from the physical operators on the ground and channel it directly to corporate entities and private equity firms. The quality of the food, the cleanliness of the kitchen, and the safety of the workspace are the first variables to be cut when the spreadsheet demands a higher return on investment. And as we will see, when those cuts run too deep, the consequences move from financial ruin to outright public safety hazards. You pull back the curtain on the daily operations of these nationwide brands, you realize the corporate offices and the actual kitchens exist in 2 completely different realities. On Madison Avenue, agencies spend millions crafting ads that highlight fresh-baked bread, crisp vegetables, and hand-sliced meats. On the ground, municipal health department records and federal lawsuits paint a far grimmer picture of cost-cutting, decaying equipment, and systemic wage theft. The decay is not localized, it is structural. Take the case of Potbelly, a chain that trades heavily on neighborhood nostalgia and cozy acoustic performing dining rooms. In Chicago, at a Potbelly location on Belmont Avenue, public health inspectors documented a breakdown in basic sanitation. Behind the counter, inspectors discovered a black, slimy substance actively growing inside the ice machine, the very machine used to service daily customer beverage cups. During the same inspection, the location's 3-compartment sink was found to be malfunctioning, with wastewater actively backing up instead of draining. Alongside a commercial cooler that was physically unable to maintain food-safe temperatures, these kitchen failures parallel a broader, corporate-level pattern of cutting corners. In Washington state, Potbelly was hit with a class action lawsuit alleging that the company posted job openings without legally required wage scales or benefits details, effectively forcing applicants to apply blind. Potbelly eventually agreed to pay $2,710,000 to settle the wage disclosure case. This legal pressure came shortly after a separate federal lawsuit targeted Potbelly's digital infrastructure, accusing the chain of maintaining a website that was entirely inaccessible to blind customers attempting to place online orders, when labor costs are squeezed to satisfy corporate margins. The legal violations inevitably creep into the exploitation of children. In San Angelo, Texas, federal investigators from the Department of Labor's Wage and Hour Division descended upon a Charlie's Philly Steaks franchise operating at the Sunset Mall on Sunset Drive. What they uncovered was a blatant violation of federal child labor laws. The franchise operator, Moore's CPS SA LLC, was regularly using a 14-year-old minor to operate a manual deep fryer, an occupation strictly prohibited for children that young due to the severe risk of boiling oil burns. U.S. Department of Labor Show 1. The exploitation at the San Angelo location did not stop at hazardous duties. Investigators established that 5 minors were scheduled to work hours far exceeding the legal limits allowed during the school year. Furthermore, the franchise was caught engaging in systematic wage theft. Management regularly instructed employees to clock out at closing time, only to force them to continue cleaning and closing the store entirely unpaid. While the Department of Labor recovered back wages and assessed civil penalties totaling $10,154, the reality is that such fines represent a microscopic fraction of a national brand's daily revenue. It is a system where the cost of a civil penalty is simply budgeted as a minor operating expense. My shoe. This systemic pressure is particularly intense at chains owned by major private equity firms, where debt servicing dictates daily store-level decisions. Jimmy John's, which was acquired by Roark Capital Group in 2016 and subsequently integrated into Inspire Brands in 2019, operates on a freaky fast model that leaves zero margin for operational downtime. At a franchise location on Kentucky Avenue in Vestavia Hills, Alabama, this pressure reached a breaking point. Employees at the store went on strike and filed complaints after management reportedly forced them to work and serve food for nearly 2 weeks without any hot water under pressure. Jimmy John's locator, show 1. In a sandwich shop, hot water is not a secondary convenience. It is a legal requirement under the Alabama Health Code to sanitize meat slicers, prep tables, and employees' hands. Running without it is classified as an imminent health hazard that requires immediate closure. Yet, staff reported that the store's coolers, housing tuna, meats, and vegetables, were simultaneously overheating for 11 days, with corporate management allegedly expecting them to keep serving customers regardless. This pattern of deferred maintenance is visible elsewhere. In September of 2025, a Jimmy John's in Pensacola, Florida, was flagged by inspectors for failing to properly clean and maintain the premises, resulting in recommendations for an administrative complaint. Alabama Department of Public Health, ADPH. You show 1, but the ultimate scale of these operational and legal battles is best observed at Subway, the world's largest sandwich chain. In late 2024, a landmark class action lawsuit was filed in a New York federal court by resident Anna Tollison. The suit accuses Subway of grossly misleading consumers through its digital and print advertising. Specifically, Tollison alleges that Subway's advertisements for its steak and cheese sub depict a sandwich containing at least 200% more meat than what is actually delivered to paying customers. Wisher 2. This false advertising claim is accompanied by serious labor and food safety crises. In Los Angeles, a long-term Subway employee filed a lawsuit seeking $54,000 in unpaid overtime, documenting what her attorneys described as egregious wage theft. In Washington state, federal investigators recovered $75,000 in unpaid back wages across 4 separate Subway franchises. The most severe consequence of this operational neglect occurred in Lombard, Illinois, where a franchised Subway became the epicenter of a massive Shigella sonnei bacterial outbreak. Over 110 people contracted the painful gastrointestinal infection, and 10 victims required hospitalization. A subsequent investigation by the DuPage County Health Department and the Illinois Department of Public Health revealed a catastrophic breakdown in basic hygiene. Sick employees, carrying the highly contagious bacteria, were actively working shifts and handling raw ingredients without adequate hand washing. The outbreak resulted in more than 70 lawsuits handled by food safety firm Marla Clark, exposing the lethal endpoint of an industry that prioritizes speed, high franchise turnover, and minimum wage labor over